Boarding Dog Talk, we have a guest who's been a friend of mine for quite a few years. Is most well known in the dog world as a deer dog guy, shed dogs, game recovery dogs, and he's kind of carved out a niche there. But Jeremy Moore has really sort of found his way in this market as a dog trainer, as a deer hunter, as an entrepreneur. He's done all kinds of cool things. He's been all over the place. You've probably seen him on North American Whitetail TV. You probably read about him in a ton of different magazines. I know I've written about him a couple times, and I'm super excited to have him on here. So, Jeremy, thanks for being on this episode today.
Thank you, man, for having me. I really appreciate it.
So I wanted to talk to you about something right off the bat because there's something I see. I interview dog trainers all the time. I'm working with them, and you have a style. From my perspective, is sort of maddening because when I ask you, hey Jeremy, how do you teach a dog to heel? You immediately start thinking about, well, what dog are we talking about? What's the situation? How old is this dog? How long have we worked with it? What kind of dog is it? And you look at dogs differently than some trainers. Some trainers are like, this is how I do it. This is how I do it. This is how you do this with this dog. And like a blanket statement for obedience training or the upper level, blind retrieves or whatever. But you look at dogs philosophically. You look at them in a way that's like the individual dog and the individual day-to-day situation you find yourself with that dog. And I think that's a fascinating training style.
Yeah, I appreciate you recognizing it because I think some people, it's confusing probably to a lot of people. My approach, my thoughts, my beliefs when it comes to dogs are, I really think that some trainers have a style of training and the dog has to fit into it. I'm a believer in that each dog is probably a little bit different. Some are a lot different. And my style, I have one goal as a trainer, and that's to get the most out of the dogs. And so the way I believe I do that, I think I have my best chances of doing that, are by setting my training style up to fit certain dogs. So I have to be flexible. And so I think that's the best way to get the most out of them because I just know, I've done it long enough and I've worked with enough of them to realize that they are different. They're not the same. And I think it's, sometimes I think from a trainer standpoint, we have to accept and be okay with the idea of it's not necessarily always going to be on my terms. It's not going to always be my way. I think it's like dealing with people. I liken the idea of dog training stuff a lot of times to like human stuff. And I look at it like, I'm a teacher or I'm a coach. And like, I've got a background in sports. And my kids play sports. And so I look back and I go, the only way a good coach wins, like consistently, is they are constantly making adjustments based on their personnel, who's on their team. And each one of the people on their team probably takes a little bit different approach to get the most out of them. Some kids you can really push. Some kids quit when you push. So I think dogs are the same way. And I don't think people think about dogs that way. I think people think of dogs and they go, these are like little robots that you buy them when they're real little and they're cute. You send them off to a camp and then they come back and they're magically transformed into the same thing. I just don't think it's that simple. And so my training, the idea behind my training is kind of built around that.
So that's an idea that I'm kind of obsessed with, that you brought up, about, puppies being little robots and they're all going to turn into the same thing. And I read something years ago. I can't remember where it was, but it was talking about how we generalize with animals all the time, but we don't accept it with people. We shouldn't. So, somebody will say, well, lions can jump, or a leopard can jump 15 feet up into a tree. Well, some leopards can, some
Right.
can't, right? Or, it's not like saying because LeBron James can dunk a basketball that everybody can,
Right.
just because one human can or one certain. And you're right. We look at dogs that way and we go, well, I got this well-bred lab puppy. This is what it's going to do, and this is how I'm going to train it. But when you can take two dogs out of the same litter, which should be, cookie cutter genetics, everything, and
Totally.
they're different, right?
Absolutely. I've got two of them right now. And it's a great point because I was actually, as soon as you started saying that, I was going to make this example of, we got a brother and sister right now that genetically they're identical. Their culture has been very similar. Their upbringing has been very similar. They have very, very staunch differences as far as like how they work, how they handle everything about them. And so my training with those two dogs is real different. Like it's dramatically different. The thing about it is like I pride myself on the idea of over years and years and years and years of dogs now. I don't have any that failed. I don't consider any of them to have failed. And I hear people talk about dogs that just don't make it. My problem with that is I think people give up on dogs, and the reality is it's not a fail on the dogs, and it's a fail as the handler. It's a fail. We didn't figure out how to communicate with them. They will do it. Like, that's the one nice part about all dogs. They will do it. It's a matter of having them understand, and we don't speak the same language as them. So as a trainer, we can't explain it to them verbally. We can't explain it to them in English and expect them to understand. We have to maybe make some adjustments on how we get our point across to them. And that gets it. Then you start digging into like styles of training. So do I have a style of training? I do. Is it set in stone? Absolutely not. Like day to day it changes. But it also has changed greatly over the last years. I mean, like I'd say probably over the last 5 years, dramatically. So if you looked at me training the dog 6 or 7 years ago versus today, you'd see some pretty big differences, I think. But the foundation of it and the core idea behind it, I will say, has not changed greatly. It's some of the micro things that I've adjusted.
So give me an example of something, that 5 years ago you would have done or not done, and today is different.
Patience. I think patience is a huge one. I still have lack of patience. It's a struggle I have. I wake up every day and I say a prayer, and one of the parts of it is I pray for more patience because I need it. Now that's dogs and outside of dogs, so it's applicable in all of life. But I think 5 years ago, I probably put more pressure on myself because of timelines and time frames. I looked at how long certain things were taking. I looked at how old certain dogs were. I used that as benchmarks. It created a lot more stress on me. Now today, I don't care. I just don't care. I have clients that care a lot, and my biggest struggle is not with their dog. It's with them understanding the idea of patience. Yep. But I'm really lucky that I have a lot of clients that I train multiple dogs for, and so they understand. They get to a point, they get it. It starts to click. I talk about things clicking with dogs, like you do something over and over and over, and they might not know how to do it, and then all of a sudden, I figure out the right way to explain it to them, and it makes sense to them, and they do what I ask, or they perform. And I always say that it looks like it clicks, like the light bulb goes on. We have these light bulb moments with dogs. I'm looking for them all the time, and then I try to build off of them. Well, with people, it happens too. And after a while, I have lots of different types of clients, and there was one in particular recently that really asked me a lot of, when do you think the dog's gonna be ready to come home? I got tired of it. I'm not short with them, but I get it. But I got tired of it, and finally I just said, I don't know, in a couple of years. And the look on their face was, what? I said, if I tell you a couple of years, I know it'll be less, so I'll look like a hero. But if I tell you 6 months, 9 months, 3 months, whatever it is, and it doesn't happen, all of a sudden now I'm under delivering on a promise, and so I won't do that. So that's one. I've become more patient. I need to be a lot more patient. Like I still suffer from that. I think everybody does, but that's just one. That's
for sure.
Example.
I know you're a hardcore bow hunter. You and I talk a lot about deer, and we live that lifestyle too. And when you're talking about your evolution as a dog trainer and how you're learning to just sort of let each dog play out under your guidance, and you're reacting to the dog's reacting to you, and you're working together to bring out that potential. When you said that, it reminds me of how I feel about bow hunting now, and I know you do to some extent too, where it's when you're younger and you get a trail camera photo of a big one or something, you want to charge in there, you want to hunt them right away.
Totally.
You have a night off, you're going to go hunt, you're going to go do it, you're going to go into your best spot. And now I feel personally, and I think you do too, that it's more of you play the long game, and you're like, okay, I know this deer lives in this area. I'm watching the weather. You're waiting for the right conditions. You're working on your spidey senses a little bit. Some night they might tingle and you go in, but you're not forcing it. You're just letting it play out how you feel like your best result's going to come. And it's an exercise in patience. It's not just charging in there to make something happen. It's just like this to be as rewarding as possible for you and for you to have the best chance of success. It just has to sort of play out. And that's kind of what you're saying with training dogs these days, huh?
Totally. It's bigger picture for me. I think bigger. I think I see, and my vision is more big picture with everything that I do now, but that doesn't mean that I'm not super micro. Like I'm looking at, because I understand that all these little things are what gets me to the big picture. It's just the idea of combining in patience with it to understand it just takes a while. I think you're right with the analogy when it comes to the bow hunting part. And I look at it and I go, there are the other part to add on that. The other part of me is like, over the last, I don't know, years, I have changed greatly with, what gets me going too when it comes to the bow hunting part. Like, I used to get a picture of a buck, go figure out how to kill that buck and be super aggressive towards it. Not only do I not do that, because I think it's counterproductive at times. I think it ends up screwing me up more than it helps me oftentimes. And so, but that's on the right now level, but on the bigger level, sometimes I get a big deer on and I go, I don't know if I want to kill that deer yet. Like, I might just wait a while and see if there's another one to kill. And so it's a couple of things that I'm really blessed with the idea of, over the years, my opportunities have become a lot better. Like I have a better land. I have more opportunities to hunt. I can be pickier. I don't work a job right now that I only get a week of vacation that I have to go and hunt. And so all these different things have added into it. That's specific to bow hunting, but it's also, it also is true with my dogs. Like my standards and levels change and adjust as the years go on. And sometimes I get too much on that. And then I realize that I've got a dog right now that I'm so worried about her steadiness. I've worried and not worried, but I've built in this steadiness to the point that I've become so rigid with the training. The dog is just flat out struggling a little bit with confidence was struggling to pick stuff up. And so, but I was so freaking worried about it being so steady and like don't want to take steps backwards. And then finally I realized, boy, she's on pins and needles with me. And I'm big on feel, trust, connection. Like that's to me, I have to have that. If I want to get the formal training stuff and the X's and O's, I have to have that stuff first. So I got so I had this dog so on pins and needles that finally I just said, you know what? I'm going to treat her like I don't care about training. Like I just, whatever, let's have a little bit of fun. And all of a sudden the dog starts picking it up for me. And I go, I had to go to the extreme. I had to go from one of real worried about these formalities and make sure that everything was polished and clean. And then I went to I just don't care. It can be a mess. But the dog made a retrieve. And so I got one thing, but I sacrificed the other. And so I'm a big believer in balance, finding balance. And that doesn't matter what you're doing. Sometimes you're going to go to the left real far and achieve something, but you're going to give up on the right. And then when you start getting that habit formed on the left, move back to the right and start and eventually you find yourself in the middle. I don't think there is I think you always have to be finding the middle with everything.
Well, and that point's so important. So when you bring up this dog who you veered pretty far on this steadiness training to the point where the dog, was nervous, wasn't confident, wasn't comfortable, that kind of situation, recognizing that and going, man, I need to back off, kind of reset with this dog and take a new approach. That decision is what separates somebody like you from a lot of, amateur trainers, because, I see this a lot, and I've been guilty of this with my dogs too. You want those dogs to end up somewhere so bad, but just pushing and pushing a lot of times isn't the right way to get there. And so many times, the patience you mentioned, and, making it fun again, working on the little confidence, and, because that dog wants to work for you. That dog wants to be steady. She's just, she just got to a point where mentally that dog was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And it's no bueno, right?
Right.
I think about when you were telling that story about her, my wife and I are coaching our little girls in basketball right now. So we have 6 and 7-year-olds that we're teaching like the fundamentals. They have 8-foot hoops, and it's like 9 little girls. It's chaos. And there's another set of twins on their team, just these sweet little girls, but they're very shy. And so I had them. We broke up into groups, and they were shooting baskets. And you could just see when they'd make a basket, and you'd tell them they were rock stars, and high five them. You could see them just open up and try harder. Like they were. If you would have just went the wrong way a little bit with those little girls, they would have just went so much further in the wrong direction. And it's just like that little bit of what, yeah, for sure. And that little bit of encouragement, and just saying, hey, this is fun and you can do this. Like you're providing that dog the chance to succeed. And now all of a sudden everything changes. And that's so important.
Totally. So when you say that you're providing a chance to succeed 100%, you have to build off success with them. And that's why you got 8-foot hoops. That's why you don't put a 7-year-old kid on a 10-foot hoop, because the chances of him making it aren't very often. So what do? You adjust, and you simplify things to find success, and all that stuff is what you're going to build off of forever. And so, with younger dogs, and dogs get deceiving because, like, how old are your daughters?
They're 6.
6. So like 6 years old, it's easy to see that they're 6 years old. They're little. They're 6-year-olds. But if they were 18-year-olds, 6-year-old minds and skills in 18-year-old bodies, like, they look like grown-ups. They kind of look like, boy, they should be doing it. Why are these bigger girls playing on 8-foot hoops? And just doesn't seem right? But here's the thing: when you've got dogs, so it makes sense. It's easy for people to understand. When you walk into a gym full of 6-year-olds, you don't expect Bobby Knight to come out with the whistle and really get pissed. Like, you're not going to be throwing chairs and stuff because they're not setting screens and cutting. Because you're looking at them and you're going, they're 6 years old. They're little kids. Let's just have them have fun and enjoy the game. The problem is when you've got a 6-month-old dog, an 8-month-old dog, a 1-year-old dog, a 16-month-old dog, they look like dogs that are 5 years old physically, but they have mentalities and mindsets of 6-year-old kids playing basketball. So we visually see a dog and expect to get dog response. And I look at it and I go, the dog under 2 years old to me is a puppy. And so I'm going, they're puppies in dogs' bodies. And so I have to recognize and realize and be okay with it. And that's where it just goes back to this idea of when you are able to not care about the time anymore, whether it be age or weeks or whatever it is, when you stop worrying about that, things go faster. They just always do.
Yeah. And so what you brought up, I want to touch on a little bit, because I always tell people, if you get a dog, if you get this puppy at 7 weeks old, give it 2 years of training. Just devote yourself to 2 years, baby steps, all the different obedience before you move up to the higher level. But just plan to commit those 2 years, and you'll have a rock star forever. You have to keep up with it after that. But am I right there? I mean, is that ballpark? Because you said, a dog up to 2 is still like a puppy, and I've kind of always felt that way.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on what your ultimate goal is. Like, if we're talking about a dog to get into the field, to work with us in the field, whether we're doing upland, we're doing gun dog stuff, we're doing shed dog stuff, tracking stuff, whatever it is, I really believe that our training is part of it. Like, we're setting them up. That's our school. Like, that's a kid going to school. That's where they learn a lot of the foundational stuff. The real world is the hunt. And so the real world is like, you get out of school, you go get a job. Like, you have to live in society. You have to sustain yourself independently. So that's the hunt. And so what I always say is, you need some experience in order to do it. Like, you can't train a dog. You can't train a dog for 6 months and then put it out in the field and go, finished gun dog. Because the reality is you need some seasons, because there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen that you just cannot and won't simulate in training. So you prepare for it. But the real experience, like a tracking dog especially, the biggest way to accelerate a tracking dog to really be a tracking dog is to put them on lots of tracks. Bird dogs, I think, needs a lot of birds. Gun dogs need a lot of birds shot over them. So it's experience that you take all of the practice, the foundational stuff that you've worked on in those, say, first 2-year window, and then you start to transfer it. You start to transitionally implicate it into what you're doing in the field. And then it's still training. Like, yep. I have people that go, man, dog's been with you for a year. I should be ready to just go run it and hunt it. Well, to a point, but I think the reality is when you take it, that first year or two is training. Like, that's continued training. And so, but when we talk about all this stuff, now we're starting to talk like years. Like, we're talking a couple of years. And there's a lot of people that are listening probably right now that are probably going, oh my God, I got to wait that long. Well, there's a little word that we talked about earlier, patience. Like, it's the most important part. And once we can get better with that, whether it be with dogs or kids or life, things are a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah. Well, and you're so right. And one thing that I keep getting from you, and I've known you long enough, so I know this to be true. The one thing that I think that we haven't touched on that people need to understand is, when you mentioned that dog earlier that you were getting a little heavy-handed with and trying to push her, and she wasn't responding well to it. Part of that comes from just our personal ego, right? We want a dog that's a rock star, and you're at the point now in your career, you don't really have anything left to prove dog training wise. You're super established. You have awesome clientele. I think that's probably one of the reasons why, even though we didn't touch on it, you said you've changed so much in 5 years. There's nothing, you don't need to prove yourself. You don't need, there's no ego that has to get into the way of the development of these dogs anymore. And so you've kind of ended up in this good place where you allow this to happen the way it's supposed to be. And so much of what we do, I mean, when we hunted together a few years ago there in northern Wisconsin, I was terrified to have you meet my dog, because I'm like, this guy's a professional trainer and I'm this idiot. He's going to think my dog's this total shit for brains. But at the same time, I'm like, who cares? Like,
right.
Who cares what other people think? Like, just, you got to try to get your dog where you need it to be. So you're happy with it. But I remember thinking that, I'm like, oh, I don't want this guy to see my dog. Like, she's going to do a bunch of stupid stuff and he's going to think she's terrible, and that's just on me. That's just dumb.
Yeah. So first off, I'm flattered by you saying that. I have to disagree with some of it. Like, I think, I know for a fact I'm nowhere near as good of a trainer as I could be or should be. And so it's constant. I'll never be as good as I want to be. I don't think anyone is. I think I'll always be able to get better. And so I need to. Like, right now, I need to continue to grow as a trainer in so many areas. But the reality, like with this little dog that you had mentioned, and I just don't want it to be confusing. Like, you had mentioned, you running into this roadblock with her, got a little heavy with her, not heavy-handed, like force-wise. What my problem is my frustration levels. I got pissed. Like, I'm a human. And so I got kind of pissed because I went, why is she not doing what I'm asking her to do? I know she can do it. And so as soon as my mentality went to, I got angry because I was disappointed in her. I was frustrated probably with myself. I knew I was probably forcing some things, like timing wise, not necessarily like physically. This little dog, I can't even look at her wrong. And she'll, it's just real soft. And I like soft. A lot of people talk about soft as a negative. To me, it's a positive. I enjoy it. I like it. I'm a big believer in the least amount of pressure in order to get a change and get the job done. And so I don't like dogs that aren't real soft, because it means I might have to put more pressure, and I don't like putting pressure on dogs. So I think, the biggest thing when I started getting heavy was I was getting pissed myself. Well, my dog reads me better than I can read it. And so as soon as I'm upset, as soon as I'm angry, she senses that before than anyone around me does. And then all of a sudden it's a counterproductive thing, and it snowballs in the wrong direction. And all of a sudden she starts to shut down more. Well, what does that do to me? I want to get this stuff accomplished as she's shutting down more because I'm getting pissed. Well, what's that going to do to me is going to get me more pissed. And so now all of a sudden we're really snowballing. And I think there's points where this is another thing that I probably have gotten better at over the last while, and I need to continue to improve on it and be conscious of it. But I think that self-awareness and understanding when things aren't going good, sometimes the best thing to do is stop. Sometimes the best thing to do is take steps back. So instead of letting it continue to amp up, my mindset is always like, I've changed it. I talk to myself like I'm weird that way. Like I'll remind myself of things, and I'll say things in my head. And sometimes my answer, at that moment, I scream to myself, stop trying to push this, and instead find something to end it on. Like just end it on something. So it can be as simple as going back to like the most elementary thing in the world. Just get a win and get the hell out of here. And so those are a lot of times I'm reminding myself of that constantly.
Well, and I didn't mean that heavy-handed, like you were smoking, smacking every dog earlier. No, but I'm referring to just pressure. And what you just said, what you just talked about there, about getting a win, recognizing that situation where you're just about to drive it into the ditch. What it reminds me of is, my little girls, we fish all the time in the summer. We go up north to the lake. We fish all the time, and they want to cast and set the hook and catch their own fish. So we're doing a lot of throwing swimming jigs for northerns and bass and stuff. And it's hard for a 5 or 6 year old to do this, but they want to do it. And so I'll do everything I can to make sure they can, but sometimes it just doesn't work out, right? They get frustrated. They can't cast. They cast in the trees, whatever. Then I start to get, ticked off. And what I see in that situation, it's like when you're working with a dog, it's like, I know in myself and I know in my kids now, when we hit that certain point, it's time to just, put the boat on shore, go look for some agates, go skip rocks, go catch some frogs, reset. Like just set the fishing rod down, go have some fun, and get that win. Like you said, it's stupid. It's little things like that, but it matters so much to your, your temperament, the dog's peace of mind. The dog gets a win out of it, and it's just it's the best way to go about it. And that's a day-to-day thing, or a week-to-week thing for sure, right?
Absolutely, it's ongoing, and it's essentially like, it's just like you described. It's salvaging something. I'm a big believer that they're always learning. We're always training. So we have to keep that in mind. That's a mindset that you have to take on as a trainer. But it's also something where I think I'm always looking to gain something. I'm constantly always looking to gain something out of everything, every opportunity I have. And so sometimes gaining stuff is just simply not going backwards. And so you can salvage a otherwise lost session by just getting something out of it and learning from it more than the dog. And then figuring out next time, how did I get myself in this pickle to begin with? Like usually when dogs struggle, it's not the dog. It's usually how I set them up. So if I can get out of it, because I know I made a mistake, I set something up wrong, we're just struggling, salvage it, get out without taking steps backwards, and then learn from it. So the next time I go back to doing this, I go, how come I got in that spot? There's this definition of an insanity, doing something over and over and expecting different results. Well, Jesus, man, when shit doesn't work, change. Yep. So if I have a setup that isn't working and I'm trying to achieve something, I'm an idiot if I go back the next day and try doing it again. So instead I learn from, and I kind of break it down and I go, how do I think I got in the position I got into? And then tomorrow when I do it, I'm going to set myself up to take a step back and build to be able to get to the point that I wanted to. And usually when I start thinking about it that way and figuring it out, I can make it happen. The other thing that happens is we're talking about when things aren't going well. When things do go well, this is another thing that you have to check yourself, and kind of I reminded in my head is things might go really well for me for a day with a dog, and I'm working on something, and boy, they're just nailing it and they're doing really well. There's an inherent tendency in me, and I think every other human, when things are going good, to just keep going. So what happens is when you get into a session and things are going really well, and I go, wow, she smoked it, and I got to my goal. When I go into a training session, I usually have a little bit of a goal in my head of what am I trying to achieve out of this thing. I might get there, and I get there earlier than I thought, and I go, wow, awesome. Now it's a point where I have to measure and take in my mind, do I push her again or push that dog further and try to get the next thing out of it? Or do I go, awesome, end it, be done, and build off of it tomorrow? And a lot of times we get so excited about the momentum that we've built, we keep going. And then all of a sudden, you pushed it so far without really thinking about it, preparing for it. And now all of a sudden you went from a really good session to you caught yourself in a real pickle and you're in a jam and you go, damn it. Not only did you give up what you gained in it earlier, now you're back in the same position of a potential issue with getting some success out of it. So I think it's having the ability to assess it constantly, and it's a real fluid thing. It's got to be ongoing. And when things are going well, figure out when do you stop, when do you end it, and be like, hey, that was a great lesson. We'll build off it tomorrow. When things go cluster right away, you go, how do I avoid that in the future? Salvage it, get out.
So that what you're talking about there, it reminds me so much. Not to keep going back to this bow hunting thing, but think about. There's a serious parallel here between shooting a bow and training a dog. A lot of people I know, a lot of bow hunters I know, they won't shoot all week. Like let's say it's August, but they'll go out Saturday and they'll shoot 100 arrows to make up for not shooting Monday through Friday. And the first 20 go pretty well. Then their arms start to get tired, but they don't want to admit it, and they're having fun and they're trying to cram it in. By arrow 70, mentally they're shot, physically they're not doing that well. And to me, I'm always like, go shoot a dozen a day or shoot 6 arrows a day and just have good quality short practice sessions. Same thing with a dog. If you think you're going to get a puppy and only train every Saturday for 3 hours, 10 minutes into that dog's going to be like, I'm bored and I hate this. But if you have 10 sessions a day that are 1 minute long or 3 minutes long or whatever, and you just have that dog doing these little things. So whether it goes great or it goes south, it's just this short little good lesson. And if it goes bad, there's not a ton you're losing by having that little lesson go bad. Like you said, you take your steps back, you start over on the next one, and you give them a chance, and you tweak your program a little bit so you don't follow into the trap that you did on the last one.
Right.
And I think that point, it's easy for us to say because we understand that, and it's hard. You got a lot of stuff going on in life, and it's easy for me to tell somebody, hey, train your dog 10 times a day for 1 minute or something. People go, well, I'm busy, I have kids, whatever. Right. Like, yeah, we're all there. We're all busy. We all have kids. Some of us have kids on the way. We have a lot of stuff going on. And you can find time to do that. And it's necessary, right?
Totally. What do you got, a kid coming on the way?
No, you do though, don't you?
Oh yeah, I reminded myself. Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Man, I hope to God I don't have a kid on the way. My wife throws litters, and I don't need. I don't need any more than that.
You're right though. Like, when we're talking about this parenting thing, here's what I tell people about raising dogs: is it's no different than raising kids. And like when you raise your kids, unfortunately, it doesn't work if your mentality is going to be bring the baby home and then sit down with your wife and say, well, what do you got going today? What do I got going today? Tonight when we're both home at 5:30, let's set aside 10, 15 minutes and we'll work with the kids. Like, that doesn't work that way.
Nope.
When you bring kids home, life changes and the kids become part of the life. And I don't set aside time to raise my kids. It just becomes part of our life. And so I look at dog training the same way. I don't think you have to set aside 10 1-minute sessions. I think you can figure out how to build sessions in to stuff you're doing no matter what. And now it doesn't take you any time. It's the only way I get dogs trained, is because I don't set time aside to train dogs. I figure out how to build it in to everyday stuff, and then it doesn't take any extra time. It does take more work. It takes more thinking. It takes more execution, but so does everything.
Yeah, we should clarify that, or I should. It's a commitment to being as efficient as possible. So when you feed that dog, you're working steadiness. When you go in and out of the doors, you're working. When you take a little walk at night with them, you're working heel. I mean, you can build so much of this in, but it takes a little discipline. Like you have to say, I'm doing this, and you have to have everybody in your family doing that. And what I wanted to talk about with you, that kind of peels off of that, is time management and this sort of entrepreneurial spirit that you have. I'm obsessed with self-made people. I think I hate when people complain about this country and say there's no opportunity, blah blah blah, life's too hard, bitch and moan. There are so many opportunities if you're driven to succeed out there. And I don't know if we'll talk to a better example in this podcast of that than you, because you have a billion different things going on. You've got the DogBone business. You're training shed dogs and game recovery dogs. You've got the Hodag thing going on now for the deer world. You got your own podcast. Yep. You've got Mighty Pet, this project going on. You guys, that's one thing I've always been super impressed with you about since I've known you, is I've watched you like not be content at any level. You always got something going on. Every freaking time I talk to you, you're like, hey, we're working on this new thing, or I got this secret project in the works. And I want to know how you manage it. Like, how do you manage your time and yet stay driven to keep making sure that these various projects are successful?
Man, that's a great question. And I thank you for that. It's tough. I think it's partly like, so for my family, like it makes it easier. I think it doesn't make it easy, but it makes it easier because our family is so involved with everything we do. Like it's our life, like our careers. A large part of our careers is so connected to our lifestyle. So I look at, what we're doing as a family, what we're doing. I've got a business partner, Scott, and you know Scott well.
Yep.
What he does and how he balances life and the business, like it is kind of crazy. And I think that it's totally a choice. Like it's not something that I will mirror your sentiment when you say like, I love this country. Like I think our country is the best because I don't know anywhere else you can do this. And the reality is we can do it. We have the opportunity to do it. And I think a lot of folks want to do it. The difference that I have found and have had to remind myself of regularly, and I continue to, is the fact that ideas are really good and great. And there's a lot of people that have really good ones. It's really hard to execute them. It's really hard to do them. So like last night it was 12:30. When I came back to my house, my wife was in bed working on some papers. Like she was on her computer. No, she's pregnant. Like she's going to have a baby in a couple months. And so like on her plate right now, she has so many things. And so when I come back I was up here, I don't even know what time I left. I was probably up here about 8. I had come back up to see her and talk to my son. And then I went back down to the shop and I worked. Next thing I knew, it was 12:30 and I was back up here. And so the reality is like that gets old, but I've also come to realize who else is going to do it? Like that's the nice part about when you're doing what we're doing. Like we choose to drive our own bus. So I better not complain about having to do a lot of work when I'm the one who's lining up the work. So yep. It's just something that I think, for me, it's never really been an issue in my mind I've always been okay with it because I have my back. I used to work for people. I consider myself a really good employee. I worked construction, so right off the bat, it's like you either work hard or you don't make it. My family is all construction background, so like it was all about being efficient and working hard, and that was how you found success. And so I did that out of school, and I did that for years until we decided to make this leap and try to start our own company with some ideas. I think part of the reason we had success was we had products that were unique and different, and there was some creativity to it as opposed to just trying to replicate something that was already out there and try to out market them or whatever there's a lot of tactics in business, but our success has been because we've provided something that's unique and somewhat new. And that was the niche part of it. And then from there, it's like, then you got to just add on all the other stuff that businesses need to. You need support financially, you need support marketing wise, you need all those other parts and pieces. But for me, it was like when I worked for these other companies, I had some really good bosses. Like I had good owners of the companies, and I literally would work whatever they needed, however much they needed, because when it was all over and done with, I knew they were going to take care of me, and they did. Yep. I also worked for a company, the last company that I worked for before I did this, that didn't do that. And we worked very hard as employees, and me and a group of young, real ambitious people. We worked really hard. We knew the numbers with the company, and they did very well. They made some really poor decisions business-wise, and they essentially handicapped us to the point where we just couldn't do our jobs anymore. And it was so I went like I left that going, boy, I'm going to take from this, and I'm going to go. First off, someday I'll probably have to hire some people. I'm not going to be like this to them. Like because I want people that work for me to be like I was when I worked for an employer that I really would have done anything for, because I think that's what it takes. And so I learned, what not to do as a business owner. And I also learned what does motivate people up, because it motivated me, and I try to replicate that. And now, like, the reality is like, I have no one else to blame but myself when it comes to how much stuff we have going, because I can make a decision. I can say, let's not do as much stuff. But I'm not wired that way. Like I have so many more things I want to do. And because I have the support of my wife, because I have the support of my family, because I have my partner, because we have such good partners. Like we work with, I think you got to surround yourself with people that are similar. And that's what we do with our partners. And like, we fuel each other. I mean, it gets to be, there are times where I have to like really take a step back and go, okay, I have to prioritize some things. I have to make sure I don't do everything I want to do. I'm not able to. There's just not enough time. But becoming more efficient is how I get more shit done. And so I'm trying to figure out ways of doing that. And because we have, a lot of the stuff we do, and we just have a lot more stuff that I want to do, and I think we can do. And here's what keeps me going. When I get messages, when I get emails, when I get like weird emails out of nowhere that are just, hey, I watched Live with Spry series. I'm watching the Mighty Pet series. Really want to thank you for that. Getting a ton out of it. And I go, because that's a time on our end. That's all it is. When you can hear as many people that respond back to us and thank you for it, like, it's really easy to get messages of people that are bitching. Like that's not hard. People complain about a lot of stuff really loudly. You don't always hear and see. And it's a reminder to me too, of when I get good customer service on something, I make sure that somebody within their chain hears about it, because I go, man, that was an awesome experience. And so I value that as a consumer. And so I look at it and I go, when we get those messages, when we get that kind of following, that's enough. That's enough reward to me to say, keep doing it, because you're helping people. And I think that's what we want to do. I mean, I always talked about, recently we do workshops and stuff with dogs and dog trainers. And I've come to a realization after doing these workshops, I'm not in it for the dogs. I'm more in it for the people. Like I love working with dogs, but I can't touch very many because I just physically am not set up that way. I can touch a lot of people and ultimately impact dogs that way. And that's how I think we can best leave kind of our mark.
So I think that's fascinating. I think people would assume that you get into what you're doing because you just want to be around dogs all day long, and that's what you're wired for. But that point about educating people and getting people the correct information, it's so valuable. And I think there's a lot of negatives going on in this world as far as the social media and the amount of exposure we have to random idiots out there. But if you look at it just the negative, you see that. If you look at the fact that somebody like you is out there creating a video series, teaching people how to train their pets in a positive way, if you look at the amount of information that's available, the amount of inspiration that's available, somebody that's sitting there and says, well, I could never start a business. And then they listen to you and they go, well, this guy's got kids. He's got 17 businesses going on. He's training dogs for people. He's got X, Y, and Z. I could do that. And I think that it's so neat to see that. I think our exposure to that it's good for everybody. And one thing that I like about the fact that you brought that up is because you're in an interesting position because you create products that you sell. You've got your DogBone line. You've got physical products that you guys sell, but you're also just selling you are part of the product. People will come to you to train, but more importantly, people will look to you as a qualified trainer. And that's a weird place to be because it's not like somebody's paying you and saying, hey, do this. Like you're doing this and you get the benefit of being out there in front of people and winning them over. They get the benefit of free content that teaches them what you worked years and years for. And I can't stress this enough. I think that's amazing. And way back when you started talking about that, one thing that crossed my mind that I hadn't thought about before, I grew up in a little town in southeastern Minnesota, and a ton of my friends lived on dairy farms, and they worked harder than anyone I know. Like anyone who's milking cows, especially back then, they were working so hard. And I always joke about this with dog trainers because there's like a parallel there because you can't really get away from your business. Like you guys are traveling, you're bringing dogs with you, you're doing shows, you're meeting buyers, you're busy, you're on the road, and your business doesn't go away. Like there's nobody coming in to totally take over your business. And it's sort of like when you're a dairy farmer, like you don't get away from that. Like you can hire people to help you, but that's yours. And it's like a 24/7 thing that's there that you have to mind. And that's kind of how your business is, but you probably wouldn't have it any other way, would you?
Totally. It's exactly that. And I think, for us, the dog part of it, here's where I think, and I don't know that all dairy farmers do it because they love milk. I don't know if they do it because they love cows, but I know why I got to the point where we are right now is because I love working with dogs. Like to me, that's my enjoyment. It's almost my release. It's also why I won't scale that part of our business because I've seen it happen too many times where as a trainer, you overload and it's a snowball. It's a slippery slope when it comes to kennels because volume, everyone wants to be growing and volume creates a need for more overhead and more overhead means more volume. And I just think it's counterproductive at times. So I personally look at the dogs part of it and I go, that is the part that I love. And if I get to be too much of that, I predict that I may not love it anymore. If I don't love it, like I sell training products, and like you said, I'm glad you brought it up, is the information is really important. And I don't get paid for that part, and that's okay. It's my business philosophy. It's the idea of, I feel like we have come up with, developed, offer products that I think work. They're limited. There's not a ton of them. I don't have a gigantic line of stuff. It's stuff that I think works really well. And I'm going to show you how to use it. And the reason is because I think there's some people that send dogs off for training, and I'm not saying that's bad. It works for some people. It works for lots of trainers and kennels. It doesn't work for me, and I don't think it works for everybody. So it's for the person, because I am that person. Like, it's funny because people talk to me about, like, you're a dog trainer, you're a professional dog trainer, and I think it's kind of weird because I always went, there's no NFL for dog trainers. There's no, like, you didn't make the league. So I don't know. Technically, I guess if you're paid, you're a professional, and that's fine. I suppose because I'm paid for training dogs, they consider that being professional. But the reality is I don't do that many of them. And the reason is because I love doing it, and I've seen it way too many times where people get burned out and all of a sudden they don't like it anymore. And my business is not that. My business is giving people the stuff that I think they need and can use to help them with their training. And so it's just a different philosophy. It's a different approach to it. But, you touched on the idea of you give away a lot of content. I do. I think it pisses some people off, but I don't care because I look at it and I go, I want people to trust us. I want people to trust why we're doing it, what we're doing. And if I'm looking at, like, I got, there's some people, like, there's relatives of mine that when I first started doing all these live training things and start putting all these content pieces together, like it didn't take, like, I was training the dogs anyway. I just simply did it now in front of like a camera or a phone. I mean, it's so easy to do it now. So I was able to gather what I thought was good information. And what I really think people valued the most out of it was when things didn't go very good. And the reality is I wasn't going to hide it. And I think as a trainer, a professional trainer especially, I think a lot of times people are hesitant to show the stuff that doesn't go good. They show what goes well, and they show how good of a trainer they are. Well, I think that's a marketing angle because they want people to send dogs to them. And I don't blame them for it. Like, you don't show the stuff that you make mistakes. I show the stuff that I make mistakes because I'm not interested in you going, I have to send that dog to that guy. I screw up just like you screw up. And the difference sometimes is some people don't admit that they screwed up. They think the dog screwed up. And so by me being able to show mistakes, I think it's some of the most valuable stuff I can. We have a totally different philosophy when it comes to that. But when it all boils down to it, like, our business is driven by, I need to have people that trust what we're doing, why we're doing it. Mm-hmm. And that's our goal. Like, doing these podcasts, I love doing podcasts. I'm so glad you had me to do this with you. And as you grow this thing, I'm going to continue to follow along with it. But I like doing it because you know how valuable I think podcasts are. Now, I don't listen to a lot of them. I listen to a few. I would like to listen to more. I just don't have time. But when I'm in the truck, when I'm driving, I can get so much information. And the beauty of these things is, take it for what it's worth. Like, I'm not gospel. Like, people listening to this, pick a few things out of it. Don't get over, like, I'll do a seminar for an hour, and I think people sometimes walk away. If I don't remind them at the end, don't be overwhelmed. I just dumped a whole bunch of stuff on you in 1 hour, and you can't digest it and apply it all at once. Just pick like one or two things from it, and then figure out where you're at, and then you start applying those, and then that's like a link in a chain. It just connects to the next thing. You can have links don't do me much good. When you connect them together, I've got a tool I can use. I've got a chain. And so all these little tidbits of information, whether it be podcasts like this or our YouTube stuff, we've got series on our YouTube channels, all that stuff, that's just stuff, man. Consume it all and then figure out what you're going to do with it.
Well, and that's your point there. I'm so big on just look to people who are better than you. Look to people who you can learn something from. Like you mentioned podcasts. Like, I listen to podcasts when I'm driving, when I'm running, all the time. And what I found is people always assume that I would listen to hunting podcasts all the time. And I really don't. I listen to some, but I find myself more drawn to just anything I can learn that's interesting, whether it's history or I'm obsessed with like ultra marathon runners and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm never going to run 100 miles in the mountains. I promise you that. But I love listening to people who are like, I'm working every day at this crazy goal, and they're doing things you shouldn't be able to do. And it's like, it's so fascinating to me to have so many people that we have access to now. And like you mentioned, if somebody sits in on a seminar of yours, you're going to give them 300 tips on how to train dogs. But the gist of it is you could do better. Like, just to take this away from me, like, or, me as you, like, you're learning every day about dogs. You'll show your mistakes, which is huge. And just if you take anything away from that, it's just that we can always do better. Like with the information you're putting out there and the ability to listen to stuff like this, there's so many little ways for us to just bring our game up a little bit. And whether that's dog training or whether that's something you're doing at work or starting a business or who cares,
Right.
it's amazing to me. And I love that you brought that up. I love that idea that you're sitting there going, I'm going to show people what I do. I'm going to tell them I'm not batting 1,000%. You'll see my mistakes, and I'm going to give you what I actually have going on in my life. And I always think about that, because I've done some TV work for the hunting world, and I've seen the sort of that side of the business. I've seen how the sausage is made there,
Right.
and I know people who won't show misses. They're bow hunting deer, a big game, and they won't show a miss. I know people who demand that this comes out a certain way to make them look amazing. And I'm like, man, have we not moved beyond that as a society? Like we all know, we screw up. We say stupid things. We make mistakes with our dogs. We have good days. We have bad days. We're prone to mistakes.
Right.
And I think it makes people way more comfortable to hear you say that and to see that with you, because you're right. They look at you and they go, well, his dogs must be perfect. His training must go perfectly every day. And that's bull. Like
Right.
it's a day-to-day thing that has its ups and downs. And I love that you brought that up, because that's pretty rare. I shouldn't say that. It can be rare for people to show the blemishes, and they should, and we should talk about them too.
Okay. I think it's the most valuable part for people listening. I think it's the most valuable part when people watch our stuff is that. And I shouldn't say I think it. I know it because that's what I get the most feedback on. And so, but I also think for me, it also acts as, by doing that, I think it holds it gives me some accountability too. Like I don't like looking. I'm as competitive as anyone you're ever going to meet, Tony. Like, don't play me in horse, because I'll be really pissed if I don't win. And so, but I'm constantly with the idea of improving. Now, I used to be constantly with the idea of winning. I still like winners. I like winning, but I look at it and I go, I'm going to have to lose a hell of a lot before I win the big game. So my losses, I used to get so mad about and bitter about, and they totally throw me for loops. And I was hung up on that. I still forget. I mean, it's like I used to play cards, and like if you play cards, like you totally lose. You remember bad beats bad. Like I remember all of them. I don't remember any good hands. And so life is like that for me. I don't remember the good stuff. I have to do better at celebrating little victories and understanding that that's a life thing that I need to get better at. But I also, if the second I start hanging up and going, even thinking about putting the gear in neutral because I'm going, we just did this or we accomplished that, man, kick me in the ass. Cause like, I can't, that to me is the moment when you might as well quit. Because you just I just don't believe in that. And so, and I try to these are big lessons that I don't know where I got them. Like my mom and probably my mom and dad, big influences in my life. My grandparents, like people that I've been around. I think it goes back to the idea of surrounding yourself with good partners. Surrounding yourself. You can't always choose your family, but I'm lucky. I've had good influences that way. But I just think that I'm one of my biggest goals right now is our kids. Like I want to put good stuff into them. I want to give them tools. I want to give them stuff. There's no better way to teach someone something than by doing it. Like it's so easy to have someone tell you what to do. Seeing them do it, know it. And so I just don't, that's why I'm not big on instructional stuff where I do demonstrations. I don't like doing demonstrations with dogs because I think it can have negative impacts on people watching it as much as positive. I think it's inspiring. I think it can be motivating. I think it can be good to have goals, but I feel like demonstrations with dogs are kind of just showing off what you and your dogs can do. And I think a lot of people that watch those aren't there for that. They're there to figure out how to get to it. And the reality is they weren't always like that. My dogs weren't always that good. I'm not always that good. And so I think showing that is real important. And it's a key part of like everything we do. Our licking stick stuff, like Hodeg, like you know how many freaking problems we've had with that. Like we've just had issues, and they're not always under our control. Bottle suppliers, things that the last things I thought would be an issue when developing a product like this and taking it to market have come up. And so I'll get on Facebook and I'll message everybody and I'll tell them, and I'm like really exposing it and going, hey, we had back order on these bottles. Our pallet got lost 2 weeks ago. So right now, this is where we're at, and this is when I know they're going to be in Chicago, and this is when I know they're going to be in my shop. And I'll send you a picture on our Instagram story of me bottling these bastards at 1 o'clock in the morning because I'm going to get your orders out the next day. And people get upset when you don't deliver. But if you tell them, hey, things aren't going so well right now, here's what I'm struggling with, and here's how I'm going to fix it, you know how many people will go, no problem. I don't have an issue with it. Just keep it posted. So it's our philosophy with everything we're doing.
What you mentioned there is, as a society, we're obsessed with Instagram and everybody's showing their best life possible. And we only hear from people on their wins or when we screw up. And the reality is what you're talking about is just presenting an honest representation of you and what you can do. And that people are like really drawn to that now. We're starved for honest representation of people who can screw up, admit it, are trying to work hard, or just are doing things the right way and being honest about it. And just as a random example on that, I had a reader reach out to me through North American Whitetail Magazine, like, I don't know, a month ago. And this is a guy from out east somewhere, and he said, I want to go shoot a big elk. I don't have a lot of experience, so can you point me in the direction of an outfitter who can pretty much do everything for me but pull the trigger? And I was like, well,
I want that name too.
So I went back to him. I said, listen, man, guided elk hunts really aren't my thing. I could probably give you a few names to call. Who knows? But I was like, why don't you think about this? You have limited experience. You think somebody's going to be able to put you on an elk, but you may go on the most expensive elk hunt possible and still have to climb 1,000 vertical feet in the morning before it gets first light. They're wild animals. You don't, unless you're hunting them in a pen. Right. You don't know. You don't know. The outcome is not, a foregone conclusion. I said, why don't you try to do an antelope or a mule deer hunt first? Get your feet wet. Do the travel, do the camp, do the motel, whatever you got to do. See if this is right for you before you take that leap, because you think you love the idea of killing a 350-inch bull elk. Everybody does. Right. You have no idea what goes into it. So let's baby step this prick and see where you can end up. And he emailed me back, and I was kind of worried because I was kind of like, dude, you're living in la la land here. Right. Like, look at it realistically. And he emailed me back and he's like, that's the best advice I've ever gotten. He's like, most people just tell me to book and go and that I'll probably get an elk or something. And I was like, man, you got to be honest about this situation. And so it was an interesting thing because I kind of thought he was going to come back to me and be like, dude, go kick rocks in the street. I'll hire whoever I want and go kill an elk, and he wasn't like that. He was like, I appreciate the honesty. And I think people are ready for that. I think they're drawn to that. And I think that ties into what you guys are doing so well with all of this different information you're putting out there. We're just about out of time here, bud. Do you want to talk about, you want to tell people where they can find you, where they can find all these different projects, your podcast, all of this stuff?
Yeah. Easiest place is probably, so if you just remember DogBoneHunter, because our website is DogBoneHunter.com. And that's product stuff. I mean, like our website is relatively static. Like it's a shop. You can order all our stuff there. There is some information there, but everyone is familiar with the tools that social media offers us. So it's at DogBoneHunter for our Instagram. It's at DogBoneHunter for our Facebook. Our YouTube channel is at DogBoneHunter. And so those are our three primaries. Like those are just such good channels for us, such good platforms for us to provide information. I think circling back on what you just said is I've adopted this idea of we're going to document what we do. We're not going to create what we do. And so it's documentation over creation where it's not polished. It's not produced. Like I bought an iPhone X, which I went, man, like I've never thought about spending that kind of money on a phone before. This is a while back. And I went, this is ridiculous. And then I realized how good the camera is. And I went, how easy is this for me to be able to? So like the investment in that for me is the ability to be able to give you something through those social channels that's palatable. Like it's better than some cameras. Like it's a good, but the reality is we're not sitting down and cutting it. We're not chopping it up. We're just documenting what happens. And sometimes it's going to be real beneficial in a positive. Sometimes it's going to be real beneficial with things that go wrong. But when you look at it that way, I think it offers just a ton more info in general and a lot more value to listeners or viewers. So at DogBoneHunter is the best for all that stuff. Our licking stick thing is our new project, which is like a brand. Hodeg is the brand, and that's deer related. So like you got deer people here too. That's all licking. That's all the licking stick. So and there's crossover there. Like when you're as small of a company as us, like, dude, I sweep the floors and I write the checks and I mean everything, like, and everything in between. So like between me and my partner, we run really lean out of necessity. And so, but like we cross over. So like my social platforms, the licking stick and DogBoneHunter, you're going to see overlap. I made a mistake. I posted a licking stick video on the DogBone page the other day and I went, God damn, I didn't mean to do that. But then I realized I got a bunch more followers on licking stick because the DogBone people are hunters too. And so there is a crossover. I don't want to muddy it too much because I know DogBone is specific when it comes to dogs and licking stick is relatively specific when it comes to deer stuff. There's an overlap there and I want to make sure I keep those separate. But it's those are the best ways I think to be able to consume as much as possible. Our podcast is called I should know this a little bit quicker. It's called the DogBone Podcast, PAWD. So that was a viewer of one of our friends actually that came to a workshop, gave us the idea of naming it. So DogBone Podcast. I don't podcast as often as I wish I could. It's a time thing, but that coming on here doing this is just an awesome opportunity. I'm hoping to be able to steal some parts and pieces and use this in the future on some of our stuff too. So, but those are the easiest ways.
So they can find you everywhere. DogBoneHunter.
Google. You can find anything on the Google.
Google is your friend. Well, Jeremy, this has been awesome. I'm really hoping in the next 2 weeks, maybe we can get out and hunt some birds in northern Wisconsin like we have in the past. I just want to thank you for being on. I appreciate it. That was awesome. I hope you have a good fall in the tree stand, and I do hope we get together to shoot some birds, bud.
For sure. We'll make a point of it. I've learned recently, I lost a mentor of mine, like probably one of the most influential people in my life just this last week. He was on a hunt. And it's too bad because there's times in my life when I get these reminders, and that was a reminder. And so when we start talking about, we should go hunting together. We've talked about it. We should go.
Yep.
We just have to. And so I'm making a point of that having that, it's going to happen. Like, and I think, people, it's too bad that it takes that sometimes for me to realize it and recognize it, but we are going to, and we're not going to talk about we should, we're going to, and we just got to figure out so we're going to do it.
Perfect, man. Well, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you having me.